Joining me now is Colonel Rob Maness. Colonel, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening, Brannon. It's good to be back.
Great to have you with us as well. Were you able to catch any of my interview there with Gordon Chang?
Yes, I did.
Thoughts, please?
Very interesting. I think that most of us that are observers of what's going on inside the country through the southern border are in pretty much 100% agreement that, we're talking about divisions worth of Chinese military-age males that have come across this border illegally. Some have even come into the country legally through airports through this one app system that our impeached Secretary of Homeland Security is allowing and flying into our own airports. And we're not tracking on them. We're not tracking on them. We're not tracking on the 30,000 Turks that have come through the border. We're not tracking on the tens of thousands of Islamists from countries like Yemen, even Gaza, Lebanon, Iraq. None of those are we tracking. And that puts us at extreme risk, Brannon, not just of a terrorist attack, but as Gordon was pointing out, and he and I are in total agreement on this, the inside attack of a Chinese, well, I'm just going to call it what I think it is, fifth column, that could do a multi-spectrum attack simultaneously or near simultaneously of our grid, our water system, our transportation systems, hit entertainment venues for as high-value targets to create mass casualty events in more than one location around the country, all while we're sitting on our hands and wasting time overseas and not focusing on where the real threat is. And it's right here inside the United States of America from those people and from the people that support them that are actually in our government and some elected officials. And that's even more troubling. That, as Donald Trump said when he spoke this weekend, is the biggest threat to the existence of the United States of America, is those people that want to attack our rights, attack our way of life, and remove our ability to defend ourselves.
Wow. Colonel Rob Maness, by the way, folks, has a show every day with us. I think we just moved you to 2 p.m. Central, so you come on right after my radio show. So 2 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday at worldviewtube.com. He will also be going to the Republican National Convention along with Tamara Scott. She'll be there as well. So we'll have at least, I think Colonel Mills might be going as well. So we'll have at least 2 people on the ground reporting back to us there at the RNC convention in Milwaukee. But catch his show each and every day, worldviewtube.com, 2 p.m. Central, and also on the replay on demand at worldviewtube.com. Now, this story here, this is PJ Media. They've just updated it yesterday. The story of a Chechen shot by a special ops colonel is getting weirder. A little more information has turned up regarding the article I wrote about 2 Chechens who were posing as utility workers, but were actually taking pictures of a special ops colonel and his family in Carthage, North Carolina, one of whom ended up shot and killed. May 3rd, 2023, 2 illegal Chechen immigrants were caught on the rural property of a special ops colonel near Fort Liberty, which is Bragg, I guess. One of them was allegedly photographing the colonel's kids and became, quote, aggressive, end quote, when approached. Colonel shot and killed him. The other was detained, questioned, and released. The 2 Chechens are allegedly utility workers, but neither had tools, uniforms, or identification related to the company they supposedly work for. Also on May 3rd, 2 illegal immigrants from Jordan were arrested trying to force their way onto Quantico base in Virginia. Todd Bensman's going to join us for that tonight. He has a brand new article on that. But let's just stop with this one. One more bullet point. Special ops soldiers around the nation report being surveilled. Listen now, especially their families. All right, folks, this is blood chilling because, as I said with Gordon Chang, we here in America, most of us, certainly the vast majority of you that watch this broadcast, you are committed to a Christian worldview, a Judeo-Christian ethics system. Many of you have children. Many of you have grandchildren. Some of you have great-grandchildren. Some of you are doctors and nurses. You're school teachers. You work in ministry, you donate your time, you have a sensitive heart. We know I get stacks and stacks of handwritten letters from you guys. This is an audience that's a very kind audience, a very generous audience, a compassionate audience. You don't sit around thinking and inventing ways to be evil. You don't think like our enemies. And there's something good to be said about that. But Colonel, there are those, that's their job, to think like the enemy so they can prepare. Maybe inform our audience who doesn't want to sit around and think up evil things or evil thoughts or how the enemy might be planning. But that's been your job as a former military guy, commander of Kirkland Air Force Base, in the Pentagon, in the key strategic room related to nuclear weapons. My blood goes cold when I think of these children, grandchildren, spouses, their wife being surveilled. I mean, only thing I can think of, Colonel, is they plan to kidnap them and then use this to distract these men from defending our country and carrying operations to defend our homeland. And if you start letting that ball run, you could see an issue at the local, state, and federal level with all of these illegal invaders here targeting key people that leaves us with very few leaders that aren't compromised in a position where they can't think about their job because obviously first and foremost is their family. I mean, we don't think like this, but you do. That's been your job. Tell us about this.
Well, you're absolutely right, Brandon. Most people don't think like what you're talking about, but people like me and like this colonel who approached these Chechen guys when he saw them taking pictures of his family and trespassing on his property, we do think like the enemy. That's what we are paid to do, and thank goodness that we do. The reporting, you should note again, just to highlight it, is that special operations units are reporting increased surveillance, not only of their bases, but of their families, of not just senior officers, but all of their members are getting surveilled at a much higher rate than they were 3 years ago. That's critically important because the enemies of America, they know that our special operations forces, doesn't matter whether they're ground, air, Navy, or whatnot, are the most effective tactically on a battlefield, and they're highly effective in training our allies in order to take on these adversaries on the battlefield when the United States is not currently doing it. So that is a way through these surveillance methods to develop what we call target packages. And those target packages will be studied. They'll be given to whatever attack teams these adversaries are formulating here inside of our country because of Joe Biden's open border. I'll remind everybody, these forces have been allowed to come through this border for 3 years now. 3 years. And they are formulating their teams. They're resourcing those teams. And you should remember, think like the enemy. These two men were Chechens. They were from Chicago. That's a long ways from Carthage, North Carolina, which Carthage is a long ways out from Fort Bragg. I refuse to use the renaming commission's name for our bases because Fort Bragg is where this installation is that the Special Operations Forces are really assigned, not that other name. That was an illegal naming commission that needs to be overturned. But to be specific on this issue, think about that. So we have two Chechens, which are technically Russian, but they could just as well be rogue Islamist terrorists that have been hired or recruited by some other adversary. We just don't know. And here's the kicker. The kicker is the United States government is not tracking on these people. We only know what we know based on reporting that we're getting, and it's limited, believe me, from the Pentagon through reporters like Jen Griffin, who, when she's reporting, she says from the Pentagon in her little reporting with her little shtick there. That means that she's gotten information directly from the Pentagon, and she's reporting it as they gave it to her because she's a mouthpiece for them. So we are getting some factual information that's very important, but it's coming from our own forces that have noticed that we're being surveilled. And if we're being told about that little tidbit, then there is much, much, much more activity going on that Americans don't know about. And it makes our Second Amendment even more important. But here's the part that frustrates me, Brannon, is that we know we have this situation now. Look, the Admiral Cottle, in charge of Fleet Resources, which controls all the Navy bases, just said in the same reporting that Navy bases are getting attempted to penetrate their security by foreign nationals 2 to 3 times a week. Look, I commanded installations for a total of about 3 years in my Air Force career later in it. We had one out of both those installations. And those installations had highly classified and highly secure, high value assets on them. And if somebody wanted to get at America, they would have been looking at those. So this has all happened in the last 3 years where these forces have infiltrated America. And they're not just terrorists, because these guys are out there, like in this case in North Carolina, they're surveilling, they're taking photographs, they're posing as utility workers. And this utility company, Utility One, is founded by a Moldovan guy. Its vice president is Russian, and nobody's answering the phone from that. And I led a utility operations for Entergy Corporation for a couple of years after I retired from the military. And we didn't go on anybody's private property or any property unless our folks had the proper uniforms on to identify themselves, the proper identification cards to identify themselves, and the safety gear. At a minimum, somebody out looking at somebody's property as part of an assessment that the utility companies would be doing, they would have hard hats and reflective gear on. They didn't have any of that with them. So they have complex cover stories, and they are from areas like Chechnya, where you could have Islamist terrorists, you could have Russian operatives, you could have Russian special forces. They could be part of the special forces unit, and they're targeting our most highly reliable and effective on the battlefield resources. Those are all indicators that we have something major that's coming. And I have a friend that's a former retired CIA operative. He just published an article this week before he left the country that said something big is coming and the U.S. government isn't telling us about it.
And what do you think that is?
We have a problem.
What do you think it is?